Introduction to the female lead. One day, the social animal Mingying suddenly received a golden finger from the heavens. Her paper man husband. Is it just that this golden finger is a fool and needs her to save it? Helplessly, she could only take on this task and embark on a journey to collect her husband in a different world. However, she didn't expect that the first world would be to date the Buddha. Mingying. Please, games are games. How could a master of reality like me? Buddha. It doesn't matter, I am a love brain that can guide myself. One sentence summary. What? The light of the righteous path is actually a love brain. 1v1, SC, sliced male lead, sweet pet text, to my beloved girl. You are not someone's vassal, nor just their wife or daughter. At first, you were just yourself, you have the ability to get everything you want. You are not my princess, you are my queen. I was born to love you, and I came only for you. Someone from a different dimension. Keywords of the novel. Quickly piercing. Sword Zune's 1000-layer routine without pop-ups, quickly piercing. Sword Zune's 1000-layer routine TXT complete collection download, quickly piercing. Sword Zune's 1000-layer routine latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Golden Finger, but a fool. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Golden Finger, but a fool. Are you sure this is the golden finger? Mingying looked at the white-haired man sitting across from here with lifeless eyes, her tone full of doubt. The golden fingers obtained by others are either infinite black cards or some kind of spatial spiritual spring. Mingying is different. Her golden fingers are a living person. An hour ago, on her birthday, just after making a wish to blow candles, there was an extra person in front of her. Then the guy who claimed to be the heavenly Tao ran over and said to give her a golden finger. This golden finger is the paper man's husband Pujan in the game. If it weren't for Tian Dao explaining everything and using his supernatural abilities to make Mingying believe his words, Pujan would have been sent to the police station now. Tian Dao couldn't understand Mingying's indifferent attitude and said, I remember you liked this Pujan Jianzun, right? Shouldn't you be happy to see him? Upon hearing Tian Dao's question, Mingying's gaze sank and she said, I don't like him. Moreover, is Pujan, who is unresponsive like a doll in front of him, really the paper man he once liked? She's not a fool, she believes everything others say. Tian Dao never expected to hear this answer. Faced with Mingying's skeptical attitude and the unlucky guy who broke through the dimensional wall to pursue love, he gave a rare explanation. I don't need to lie to you. Pujan only has one heavenly soul to maintain his basic survival instinct. Tian Dao cleared his throat. The remaining souls were scattered to other worlds in search of you. To restore him, we need to retrieve his soul. That's okay. Mingying tidied up the cake on the table without even looking at Pujan. I've never seen someone else help with this before. Can I return it? Tian Dao immediately made an excuse and said, I left in advance. If there are really any problems, you can come to me again. Anyway, the person has already been delivered, so he cannot bring them back. Moreover, this heavenly soul followed Mingying's side obediently, completely losing the initial state of rampant destruction and violence. I don't think there will be any major problems. The heavenly way, which has been fully explained without any omissions, has decisively slipped away. After Tian Dao left, the room returned to tranquility, and Mingying finally had time to look at the man sitting on the sofa. The silver hair was well coiled, with only a small amount of fine hair protruding from the forehead, paired with a black robe for extra skill. The red eyes looked extremely beautiful, but unfortunately there was not a hint of energy inside. The tear mole hanging from the corner of his eye made his beautiful face very tight. Like a beautiful doll. The flat paper figure suddenly became three-dimensional, more beautiful than she had imagined, but Mingying's mood was uncertain. Clicking on the game, I can no longer find any data belonging to Pujan. The person in front of her is unaware of their authenticity, and the only definite data is also missing. Not venting anger towards the person in front of her is already her greatest patience. Tidying up the living room, Mingying was about to go to bed when she saw Pujan, who had been sitting upright on the sofa, stand up straight and follow her to the bedroom. She instinctively reached out and stopped him. "What are you doing with me?" Pujan didn't speak, just stood there dumbfounded. "Forget it, what are you arguing with a fool about?" After all, Pujan, who only has the heavenly soul, can only act according to instinct. With a sigh, Mingying ignored him, but when she turned around, Pujan followed him again. The girl with a hard mouth and a soft heart laid a blanket and pillow for him, stuffed the person who was following him into the bed, and then returned to the room to rest peacefully. At midnight, thirsty Mingying got up in slippers and was planning to go to the living room to find water to drink. Unexpectedly, as soon as I opened the door, a white object caught my eye. It's Pujan. He was wearing his snow-white profanity clothes and curled up like this to guard the door. Having a stranger guarding the door of a room makes everyone afraid. Seeing Pujan, after a moment of surprise, Mingying only thought of one question. How long has this fool been lying on the cold floor? Will he not get sick? Probably hearing the sound of the door, he slowly opened his eyes. In the scattered red pupils, there was only Mingying's figure. Seeing Mingying avoid him, he silently stood up and followed behind her. After drinking the water and looking at Pujan, who was like a follower, Mingying could only make a floor for him at the door. Although she didn't know if he was the real Pujan, she couldn't bear to see him lying on the ground. The next day, Mingying, who woke up, packed her things and wanted to go out for a stroll. Pujan, who was following the crowd, couldn't shake it off, but she didn't change her mind. In order to avoid attracting others with Pujan's outfit, Mingying specifically found loose clothes, hats, and masks. And the red eyes that cannot be blocked will be explained as beautiful pupils. Interestingly, Pujan even wore 2 layers of clothing, but he still looked tall and without any feeling of bloating. The tall figure gave Mingying a strong sense of security. Although he is a fool who only knows how to follow, he can still be used as a tool for making backpacks. And walking in the crowd, he also instinctively avoids other strangers. Seeing Pujan avoiding strangers like snakes and scorpions, Mingying was curious and ordered many of her favorite snacks, but she didn't expect that he wouldn't resist her feeding. I originally wanted to test the other person, but I didn't expect him to eat anything. I just eat sweet things and instinctively turn my head to avoid them. Mingying, who was fed, inexplicably felt a bit less repulsive. It can be seen that Pujan, like her, prefers salty food. By the time Mingying had a full hiccup, it was already noon. The temperature rose and it was not suitable for strolling, so she decided to take a detour back home. Just strolling for a while, it's a bit tiring. Seeing the chair by the roadside, Mingying quickly sat down and rubbed her stomach, which was still a bit full. Just in the blink of an eye, Pujan, who had been following her all along, suddenly rushed over and reached out to hold her in his arms. As Mingying looked bewildered, the sound of heavy objects hitting her body suddenly rang out, followed by the sound of flower pots falling to the ground and shattering. Mingying's gaze was blocked, and she only felt a tremble as she hugged her body. It's a high-altitude falling object. Realizing what had happened, she looked up in terror and saw the man's dull expression. Holding her hand without exerting any force, Mingying struggled lightly and broke free from the man's embrace. She hurriedly looked at the other person's back and indeed saw the gray marks under the white shirt, as well as the blood seeping out. A violent cough jumped out of the man's throat, and large mouthfuls of blood gushed out from the corners of his mouth, staining his fair fingertips red, but not a drop fell on Mingying's white dress. But these Mingying didn't notice. She hurriedly took out her phone and called for an ambulance. When the phone hung up, she helped Pujan sit down in a chair covered by trees. Upon hearing his coughing sound and watching the bright red blood wet his white shirt outside, Mingying felt as if her heart had fallen into the bottomless deep sea. Besides the real Pujan, who else would protect her like this? She instinctively grabbed the corner of his clothes and squatted in front of him, her voice carrying a panic she had not even noticed. Brother Jean. Don't die. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come out, Brother Jean. It's my fault. Crystal tears rolled down the corners of their eyes and were quickly wiped away by another hand with a thin cocoon. The man, whose eyes were still silent, stopped his coughing and tried to spit out such a sentence from his mouth. No crying, eyeing. Heavenly soul. Although my wife calls me a fool, it's okay, I can definitely conquer her. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Seeing my wife, but bald. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Seeing my wife, but bald. When Tiandao was summoned by Mingying, watching her crying, he thought something big had happened. The result was that Pu Zhan, a strong and muscular guy, was injured by a high-altitude falling object and spat out a few bites of blood. Just what does vomiting a few bites of blood mean? Thinking of the wound behind Pu Zhan, Mingying's face turned cold and her tone was serious. This thing is deadly. I know. Leave this matter to me to handle, and I will definitely punish the person who lost it, but... Tiandao's gaze fell on the tightly held hands of the two. Didn't you say you didn't like him before? Mingying glanced at Pu Zhan, who was expressionless on the hospital bed, and said, at least he was injured because of me. I can't ignore him. For more reasons, she is unwilling to speak up. The heavenly way hesitates to speak. For a cultivator who has crossed countless worlds, this injury is just a drizzle, and there shouldn't be any major problems. Thinking that the guy who was divided into 10 parts could also have this kind of scheming, Tiandao just wanted to quickly solve this troublesome couple. So have you decided to help him regain his soul? Tiandao said kindly. Mingying nodded and said, what do I need to do? I will send you to the world where his soul is located. You just need to find his soul and make him fall in love with you. Tiandao thought for a moment and added, as long as you don't do anything bad, the Tiandao of that world won't reject your existence. As for your safety issues, the remaining heavenly soul is responsible. The earth soul of the first world has memories, which should not be difficult for you. This time, Mingying sincerely thank you. Tiandao quickly sent the person away and said, thank you, there's no need. Wishing you all the best. Watching the people in the ward disappear, Tiandao finally breathed a sigh of relief. He has already sent the people over according to the transaction, let them solve the remaining trouble on their own. For a world on the brink of fragmentation, is this not just an adventure? Demons run rampant in the Tianshan continent, but Daoxiang village has become a peach blossom paradise due to its seclusion. The villagers live a life of poverty but no struggle with the world. Until a few years ago, a snake fairy suddenly appeared, first using means to flood the crops in Daoxiang village, and then sending out words to the villagers to offer animals such as chickens, ducks, cows, and sheep. After some discussion among the villagers, they were still able to reluctantly accept it, so they offered a lot of livestock. In the following years, the snake fairy's appetite grew stronger and stronger. This year, he requested Daoxiang village to send him a bride. So the bride, dressed in wedding clothes, was brought to the entrance of the snake fairy by the residents of Daoxiang village, beating drums and gongs. After bidding farewell to her family, the bride carried a lantern and walked into the cave. Mingying never thought that one day she would be considered a savior. Due to encountering danger while traveling, the emerald green long sword that appeared with her killed the wild boar with one sword, and she was mistaken by the villagers of Daoxiang village as a cultivator. Then they were driven to the shelves by ducks to eliminate demons. After confirming the stability of the golden finger, Mingying couldn't stand idly by, so she took on this commission. I'm not sure about the situation with the snake demon, she didn't go deep, just stood at the door and waited for a while. The cave, emitting a foul smell, was unbearable. After waiting for a while, Mingying saw 2 green lanterns appearing in the darkness. The green lantern disappeared, and a soft male voice suddenly sounded, accompanied by a hissing voice. "My little bride, you're here." Feeling the pungent smell coming from her face, Mingying took 2 steps back and clenched the lantern in her hand, saying, "Don't come over." Under the dim light at the entrance of the cave, a green snake tail appeared in her sight. The man with black hair and green eyes, with a snake tail, spat out his crimson tongue and looked at the bride with a thin veil over her head. Seeing that delicate face, he smiled with satisfaction and said, "Little bride, it's not difficult to be afraid. I will make you happy." As he spoke, he excitedly swam towards Mingying. Unconsciously, he reached out his hand and rushed towards Mingying, while at the same time, a black mist enveloped him and swallowed up the light at a faster speed. The sound of a sharp blade piercing through flesh and blood followed by the scream of a snake demon. "Ah! Are you a cultivator? Why do you help mortals?" The lantern held in Mingying's hand turned back into a long sword, and the green sword pierced through the snake demon's heart, leaving countless snow-white flowers blooming at the wound splattered with blood. Unlike killing wild boars, this snake demon is a semi-human form that can be exchanged. For an ordinary person who has never seen blood and grew up under the red flag, Mingying is somewhat uncomfortable. But all the blood was blocked by the blooming flowers, and the soft snake demon paired with snow-white peach blossoms looked particularly beautiful. "I am not a cultivator," the hand holding the long sword thrust forward, piercing deeper. "However, cultivators are also human at first. Is there any problem with protecting mortals?" The snake demon spat out blood and quickly died, transforming back into a huge green snake. "But strangely, the black mist around here is increasing." Feeling a little uneasy, Mingying turned her head and planned to leave, only to see the bald monk who appeared at the door at an unknown time. The other party was wearing a simple grey monk robe, with golden eyes and tear stains, and a compassionate and solemn expression. Looking at those golden eyes, Mingying felt dizzy, as if there was a vortex lurking in them that was trying to suck her in. She was frightened and quickly lowered her head to look at the sword. Most importantly, his face is exactly the same as Pujan's. Intuition told him that this was the earth soul she was looking for. "Excuse me, benefactor. I forgot about the dust at the Wanxiang temple and was entrusted by the villagers of Daoxiang village to come and eliminate the demon." His gaze fell on the green snake lying on the ground, and his voice was as refreshing as water. "But now it seems that I'm late." The same face, but no sense of familiarity. "It's strange, Earth Soul is a soul that preserves memories, right? Why is Pujan looking like this in front of him? Not only did she change her name, but also..." Mingying suddenly remembered that the Pujan in front of her was not the foolish heavenly soul who had seen her before. Why can't the Earth Soul recognize her, even the remaining instinctive heavenly soul? Mingying clenched the sword in her hand and said, "Master Forget Dust, do you know what this black mist is?" Looking at the black mist that devoured the snake corpse at an unknown time, she took 2 steps towards Forget Dust and then smelled the faint lotus fragrance on the other person's body. "It's just an ordinary demonic aura, benefactor." "Don't worry," said Forget Chen in a different voice. "Are you just here to eliminate demons, benefactor?" Although it was just an ordinary problem, Mingying only felt a chill in her back. It seems like some fierce beast is lurking in the dark, waiting for her to accidentally reveal a flaw and then strike to death. Mingying shook her head and said, "I'm here to find someone." Facing her golden eyes, she smiled and said, "I'm looking for a person named Pujan. He looks very similar to you, master. Have you seen him?" "Before meeting Forget Chen. I will never like this woman who is like a curse. I will definitely kill her. After meeting Forget Chen. Why can't she be my wife? But rather from the original body of Pujan." End of this chapter. Is Chapter 3 a Buddha or a sword cultivator? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Is Chapter 3 a Buddha or a sword cultivator? As the words fell, the gaze fixed on her disappeared. The expression on the face of Xianchen remained the same, but his tone inexplicably softened. I have never seen it before. It's easy to get sick when the demonic energy enters the body. Please go out with me, benefactor. Mingying felt lost in her heart, but she still walked over. After arriving in a different world, the heavenly soul only protects her, but does not respond to her. And the person in front of her had a familiar appearance, but was extremely distant from her. The dark and demonic aura was separated by the golden light on Forget Dust's body, and the road that was originally buried reappeared. Thank you, Master. My legs are a bit weak. Can I pull your sleeve? After looking at the beautiful monk, Mingying didn't intend to give up. Forgotten Dust in the black mist did not refuse. You are welcome, benefactor. You have eliminated harm for the people. It is an honor for me to be able to help you. There is no need to respectfully address me, just call me Forgotten Dust. As he spoke, he extended his hand. In the moment she grabbed the gray sleeve, Mingying felt the cold and demonic energy around her completely isolated, leaving only her feet. She lowered her head and saw the magical energy that had turned into tentacles wrapped around her ankles. Along the line of sight, the forgetful Dust also saw this scene. He frowned and waved his hand, and the black demonic aura reluctantly dissipated in the air. Before disappearing, the demonic aura even grabbed his ankle and licked it, seeming extremely reluctant. The cold and moist feeling made Mingying tremble for a moment. Her eerie intuition told her that the person in front of her would not harm her, but there was always something wrong. Thank you, Forget the Dust. After finishing all of this, Forgotten Dust looked up slightly and said, You're welcome, benefactor. I haven't asked for your surname yet. Just call me Mingying. She won't miss the opportunity to get closer. The two of them, each with ulterior motives, maintained a harmonious demeanor as they walked outward, avoiding the black mist like snakes and scorpions wherever they went. After leaving the black mist, Mingying saw the villagers of Daoxiang village early in the morning. They looked at the group of people who had emerged on the side with a look of fear and awe. Their immortal demeanor sets them apart from ordinary people in terms of temperament. They are cultivators. At this moment, the group looked serious, but at the moment they saw her, they showed a look of surprise. The leader walked up excitedly and said, This girl. Master Xuanga. Forgotten Chen interrupted the other party with a voice. The man named the master of the Xian pavilion seemed to have just seen Forget Chen and immediately stopped in place, saying, Forget Chen Buddha, why are you here? I was entrusted by the village chief of Daoxiang village to come here to eliminate the demons, but I didn't expect the demons here to be possessed, said the villager with a shifted gaze. The village chief also stood up to prove that what Forget Chen said was true. The master of the Xuanga suddenly realized, so it was the Forgotten Dust Buddha who killed the demons here. Forget Chen shook his head and turned his gaze to Mingying standing on the side. Master Xian misunderstood. It was Mingying who personally killed the demon. I just brought the person out, he said. Upon hearing that Mingying had personally killed the demon, the head of the Xian pavilion showed a surprised look on his face and arched his hand at her, saying, It's true that heroes are born young. I'm Zuanhanyu, the head of the Tianji pavilion. I wonder if Miss Ming is willing to join our Tianji pavilion. Mingying looked at Zuanhanyu in confusion, somewhat surprised. She received her first office as soon as she arrived in a different world. But isn't the other party being too hasty in accepting disciples? I don't know much about Tianji Pavilion, may I ask which one your pavilion is best at? Zuanhanyu smiled meaningfully and glanced up, saying, The so-called Tianji Pavilion naturally involves reasoning about some mysterious things. In addition, all of our disciples are skilled at calculating and helping others avoid disasters, and their formation and talismans are all exquisite. For some reason, after saying these words, Xian Hanyue only felt a chill in his back. Unexpectedly, Mingying looked up at Forget Chen and asked, Forget Chen, how do you think I should go to Tianji Pavilion? The cold air on his body dissipated a bit, and the look in his eyes towards Mingying was extremely calm. Do you want to go to Tianji Pavilion? Xian Hanyue on one side only felt the cold air seeping through. After all, you are my life. Saving benefactor. Without you, I wouldn't be able to come out of it, Mingying replied with a smile, so I want to ask for your opinion. Of course, this is fake. In order to capture Forget Dust, she definitely wouldn't go to any Tianji Pavilion. So that's how it is. Forget Chen's tone was somewhat clear. Zuan Hanya knew that he should have a few words of goodwill with Forget Chen, asking the Buddha to persuade the girl to join the Tianji Pavilion, but his always sharp intuition stopped all his actions. His intuition told him that if he did this, it would be very dangerous. Zuan Hanyu could only listen to the Buddha opening his eyes and talking nonsense. I saw Mingying using a sword before, so I believe you have some talent in swordsmanship. Coincidentally, I have some experience in swordsmanship. If you don't mind, you can practice with me. Really? Then please do it. The girl was pleasantly surprised. When did the Forgotten Dust Buddha, who was proficient in Buddhism, also learn swordsmanship? Why doesn't he know? Moreover, in front of him, Forget Dust intercepted him like this, which disappointed Zuan Hanyu to some extent. However, the situation had already become a foregone conclusion, and he was powerless to change it. After agreeing to forget Chen, Mingying apologized and said to Zuan Hanyu, "Sorry, Master Xuanga." After waving his hand, Xian Hanyue didn't get angry and said, "It's not a bad thing for Miss Ming to follow the Forgotten Dust Buddha." Looking at the benefits, this girl who was criticized by the Heavenly Tao as the daughter of Heavenly Destiny has always been on the side of the righteous path. Moreover, it was Forget Dust who saved her. She was close to each other, and Xian Hanyue was not surprised. He worked hard with his disciples to do divination for a long time, and when he found this destined daughter, he was worried that something might happen to her. And after she agreed to the Buddha, Zuan Hanyu felt the knife hanging on his head disappear. With this thought in mind, the breath he held in his chest also exhaled. Since that's the case, I'll deal with this pile of demonic energy first. If the magic energy left here is not processed, it will have a significant impact on the surrounding area. No trouble, Lord, said Forget Chen, reaching out his hand to Mingying. Let me borrow your sword from Mingying. The sword, which refused to be touched by anyone except Mingying, finally fell into the hands of a second person from the time of crossing. The emerald green long sword was extremely well behaved in the hands of Forget Dust. The sharp sword energy directly cut through the black mist, and the invisible black mist was like a leaking balloon. Soon, the black mist that enveloped the mountain disappeared. The flowers, plants, and trees that were originally eroded and withered by the demonic aura actually regained vitality under the sword aura, and then quickly bloomed. Seeing this scene, Xian Hanyue's face was full of doubt. He remembers that all the teachings he learned at the Wanxiang Temple were Buddhist teachings. Over the years, this Buddha was most famous for his wand-lowering technique and the profound Buddhist teachings of transcending the souls of the dead. But the sword aura wrapped in the sword intent in this hand is not inferior to that of the sword master of Cangjin Mountain, and even better than many others. Although it was Mingying's sword, it was in his hand like his own sword. I always feel that this Buddha is hiding very deeply. Forgetting Dust Buddha. My wife, I'll teach it myself, so I'm more at ease. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Jealousy of him. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Jealousy of him. After being swept by sword energy, the green of Manshan was dyed with various colors. Mingying lowered her head and looked at the various flowers under her feet, her eyes full of amazement. Turns out it's not just a sword for killing demons. In the hands of its true owner, it can also create such miracles. Watching the demonic energy dissipate, Xian Hanyue didn't plan to stay any longer. He quickly bid farewell to the two of them and said, "Since the demonic energy has been dispelled, I won't stay any longer. Forget about the Dust Buddha, goodbye to our sect." Mingying, who stayed in place, watched as the people from Tianji Pavilion left. Immediately after, the village chief also bid farewell to Mingying with the people, leaving her and Forget Chen in place. Suddenly quiet down, Mingying was still a bit confused. Did it end so quickly? Mingying, your sword. The sudden voice interrupted her thoughts. The hilt of the sword was presented to her, and as she looked at the nearby forgetful dust, Mingying did not reach out to take it. Instead, she spoke up, I think he might be more suitable in your hands. She is really just a fully automatic chopping tool with the sword in her hand, and this sword in my master's hand directly revives everything, increasing efficiency by at least 100 times. Do you want to abandon him? Said Forget Chen, whose face changed and her tone was gloomy. I didn't mean that, don't misunderstand, said Mingying, who never expected this ending to be a bit foolish. What do you mean? The Buddha, whose face was as white as jade, took a few steps closer, his golden eyes showing a hint of sharpness. I just feel like it's in your hands. He plays a bigger role, Mingying said, looking at the other person with sincerity in her eyes. Isn't it appropriate for a sword to be paired with a hero? His golden eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the girl in front of him. He curled his lips and smiled, no need, he's just here to protect you. He forcefully thrust his sword into her hand and then spat out the following sentence. I'll teach you how to practice tomorrow. The girl in front of her flashed her eyes and said, really? Thank you, Forget Chen, you're such a good person. Are you a good person? Forget Chen doesn't think so. As a soul carrying memories, Forget Dust knows the truth better than anyone else. He is just a tool used to divide his original body and calculate this woman. Before seeing this person, I didn't think I would be influenced by that ridiculous emotion. How could an ordinary woman influence his thoughts and hinder his path to becoming a god? But when she stood in front of him wearing a wedding dress, her heart in her chest was pounding uncontrollably. Instinct drives him to possess the person in front of him, hiding her in a place that no one knows, where only he can see. So he changed his plan in that moment. He licked his upper jaw with his tongue, listening to the girl beside him chattering away. Forget Chen, what was the sect comparison mentioned by the Xuanga master just now? The big comparison of this sect is. In previous years, the sect competition was a competition in which the Tianjiao of various sects in the cultivation world competed with each other. Both Tianji Pavilion and Wanxiang Temple will send people to participate. It was also because of this that Forget Dust came across the villagers of Daoxiang village seeking help. When going down the mountain, there were only the two of them. When Mingying wore her wedding dress and brought it up, it was still noon, but now it is already sunset. Looking at the bald head shining brightly beside her, she felt a bit regretful. The first encounter with the paper man's wife, she actually became someone else's bride wearing a wedding dress. Unexpectedly, the Earth Soul is now a monk and a Buddha. Interestingly, when he first met Pu Zhan in the game, he was also a monk, with the same identity as a Buddha. In a moment of confusion, my feet slipped, and before Mingying could even utter her exclamation, she was firmly held by the forgetful dust on one side. The handsome Buddha lowered his gaze to look at Mingying. The afterglow of the sunset softened the tear stains at the corners of his eyes, but his words didn't sound very pleasant. Your chassis doesn't look very stable. Get up at midnight tomorrow, I'll take you to practice. Maosher is 5 o'clock in the morning. As a social worker who starts work at 9 o'clock, Mingying has always maintained a good habit of starting from 8 o'clock, but starting from 5 o'clock is a bit scary. She tried to discuss with Forget Chen and said, well, Maosher is a bit too early, right? What do you think of Chen Shi? Forgotten Chen's gaze fell on the emerald green long sword, and he smiled rather than smiled. So sure, this sword can protect you well. Mingying remained silent. Okay, tomorrow at 10 o'clock, we won't see each other. What kind of golden fingers, what kind of forgetfulness, they don't have their own reliability. If one day the golden finger is gone and Forget Dust is not around, at least she can run 2 steps on her own instead of standing in place waiting to die. And this world is in the realm of cultivating immortals, so flying with swords and the like can be very cool at first listen, okay. It's been a long time since Mingying did something like waking up at 5 o'clock. When yawning and following behind Forget Dust, the sky was still grey and hazy. Mingying had been prepared for a long time, but when she heard Forget Chen say she wanted to climb the mountain path and exercise on her own, she still couldn't hold back. Is this the first step in cultivation like this? Said Azai, who is not diligent in his limbs after reading novels for so many years. Doesn't cultivation all start with what brings chi into the body? Is what is written in cultivation novels all fake? It's not like that, said Forget Chen, shaking his head. Why do you want me to climb the mountain? Forgotten Chen's tone was calm. Yesterday I said, your lower hand is unstable. Those who cultivate immortals need to be down to earth, and sword cultivation is even more so. Can I not learn swordsmanship now? After a while, Mingying uttered such a sentence, only to receive a smiling expression from the man in front of her. What do you want to learn, Mingying? Is it the double cultivation method of the Hehuan sect? He stopped and said, or do you want to learn the way to explore the heavenly mechanism from Zuanhanyu? Hehuan sect. Of course, this is impossible. Looking back on something, Mingying's face also looks ugly. As for what kind of peeping into the sky, she doesn't think she has this talent. Holding the sword tightly in her arms, Mingying gritted her teeth and said, I'll just learn swordsmanship. As she spoke, she lifted her feet and walked up the mountain. Forget Chen didn't leave, and he followed behind her. Compared to Mingying, he looks more like he's here for a walk. Along the way, there were all white peach blossoms, and because of the sword that forgot dust yesterday, this peach blossom bloomed abnormally. As the sky gradually brightened, the wind gently brushed the branches, and white peach blossom petals gracefully fell from the branches, lingering in the bright hair. Unfortunately, Mingying didn't care and walked up with all her might, panting for breath. Angry. Forgetful Dust caught the peach blossom falling in front of him, looking at the enraged girl, only feeling amused. Although angry, Mingying did not choose any Hehuan sect Tianji pavilion, and he was actually very happy. This means she didn't just treat that game as a game. Although the reason is not because of him, but because of that Pu Zhan. They are all the same person, but they like to compete with the Forgotten Dust. Forgetting Dust, grinding knife. Every time I think of my original body, I feel itchy in my hands. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Spiritual Roots, Her Longevity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Spiritual Roots, Her Longevity. When she reached the mountaintop, Mingying felt her body hollowed out. There happened to be a platform on the mountaintop, right next to the cliff, surrounded by several sparse peach blossom trees. As she leaned against the tree to catch her breath, Mingying saw the sun slowly rising on the horizon not far away. The rising sun's rays were not dazzling, and under the cover of clouds, it emitted its own light bit by bit. The golden light reminded Mingying of the dazzling eyes of Forget Chen, just like the sun. A faint lotus fragrance surrounded me, and in the flickering light, I caught a glimpse of the forgotten dust around me at some point. A feeling of unease surged in my heart. Wearing a bald head as prominent as the sun, he spoke out, let's swing the sword 3,000 times today. Mingying, who had not yet recovered, blocked her chest in one breath and said, What? What 3,000 times? Swinging the sword 3,000 times, Forgotten Dust repeated, adding a sentence. Just use the spring return sword in your hand. Rather than knowing the name of this sword as Chunhui sword, Mingying cares more about waving it 3,000 times. Why is cultivating immortals so hard? She wanted to rise up, but in the end, she said, Forget Dust, how do you swing your sword? Don't be fooled by the handsome posture when killing the snake demon, it's all automatic attacks from the spring return sword. She's just a swordsman, she really doesn't understand any swordsmanship. Forgotten Dust walked over. Mingying was about to pass the sword to him, but he didn't expect him to grab her hand and teach her. The spring return sword swept through the air, making a buzzing sound, and quickly returned to its original position. The lotus fragrance that was within reach dissipated, and Mingying, blushing with her face and ears, began her training mission of wielding the sword 3,000 times. There is no fully automatic spring return sword carrying its own weight, and every swing consumes energy. Forgetting dust did not make people crazy and unwilling to stop, but instead allowed Mingying to take a break at the right time. Lunch was personally picked by Forget Chen, and by the time Mingying's training was completed, it was already sunset. Even Mingying, who was extremely tired, ignored the foul sweat and found a clean big stone and lay down like this. She originally wanted to take a breath, but as soon as she lay down, the warm slate behind her weakened her willpower, and her eyelids began to fight. Unconsciously, I fell asleep. At first, it was warm, but at some point, the surroundings became cold. Something enveloped her, like being soaked in cold and sticky seawater. She wanted to struggle, but found herself unable to move. There was something weighing 1,000 pounds weighing down on her, and she could only be forced to bear it all, even with difficulty breathing. Mingying struggled subconsciously and finally opened her eyes, only to see a sky full of stars. She slowly sat up and found herself still lying on the original slate, surrounded by the scorching temperature, with the spring return sword at hand. And covered in a thick black cloak, the fragrance of lotus informed its owner. There is nothing strange about the body. It's a dream. She breathed a sigh of relief and looked around, only to see the bright and broad mind on the edge of the cliff at a glance. Ah, this bald head of Forget Chen is really eye-catching. After tidying up her cloak, Mingying stood up and walked towards the other party. During walking, the red marks on the back of the neck and ankles were faintly visible between the light and thin clothes, but unfortunately the person involved did not notice them. Forget Chen, these are your cloaks. Mingying handed the folded cloak to Forget Chen. The other party took it over, but did not put it away. Instead, they draped it back onto her body. The wind is strong at night, don't catch a cold. Although the hand that had forgotten dust had not touched anyone, and was even at a distance, it gave people an inexplicable feeling of intimacy. Mingying awkwardly tied her own belt, and then heard Forget Chen say, "Why don't I teach you how to practice tonight?" Mingying suddenly looked up and looked at the golden eyes. She was surprised, isn't that practicing during the day? The man in front of her smiled and covered her eyes with his hand. It's the same during the day, but now there's another way to teach you, close your eyes. Although puzzled, Mingying obediently closed her eyes. After losing sight, other senses become more acute. The howling wind, the falling leaves, and the chirping of grasshoppers intertwined, but soon, a warm and gentle green light suddenly enveloped her, and everything fell silent. Various light particles appeared in her sight, and then the green light particles flew towards her, blending into the green light particles that enveloped her. At that moment, Mingying seemed to awaken her instincts, constantly drawing in the green light particles around her, and the green light wrapped around her guided the light particles to be stored in the lower abdomen through the veins. Every time the light particles enter, it is a pain of bone gouging and heart piercing, but it will soon be cured by green light. When the green light disappears, Mingying opens her eyes. The stench that came rushing towards him disappeared with a wave of his hand, and he spoke sincerely, "Congratulations, Mingying. You have successfully infused qi into your body, washed your tendons and marrow, and officially entered the path of immortality." Mingying guided the green light particles she had just collected, looking at the tender green vines forming at her fingertips. She felt a bit confused and said, "Is this Mu Ling Zhen?" "Yes, Mu Tianlingen, just like me." He looked extremely excited, but his face looked so pale. "In that case, you can continue to use the spring return sword." Mingying doesn't quite understand what the heavenly spirit root is, but she can feel that the green light particles she initially felt will automatically enter her body. At the same time, the spring return sword that has always been held in hand can also move freely. In theory, she should be happy to be able to cultivate immortality. But this Ling Zhen is the same as Forget Dust. His pale face makes her more uneasy. But Forgetful Dust quickly put a bracelet into her hand and said, it can mobilize spiritual energy and can be used as storage space. There are some books related to cultivation inside, Mingying. You can take your time to read them. Mingying wanted to say something, but Forgetful Dust interrupted her again. It's already late, I'll take you back to rest. We'll practice again tomorrow. Before she could refuse, he waved his hand and sent the person back to the foot of the mountain. After the forgotten dust left in place regained peace around him, he finally couldn't help but gasp for breath. A bright red blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth, quickly staining his collar. A fist-sized black hole was exposed in his lower abdomen, with blood flowing through it. His face was even more unsightly than before, and even revealed a gray-white color that only death could have. Like a plant that has lost its vitality, it will soon wither. He took out a thin piece of red gauze from the storage ring and gently kissed it, looking crazy and obsessed. Even if you are destined not to cultivate immortality, what? I have a way to keep you. With you on the path of immortality, it should be even more interesting. I'm looking forward to it. What will you look like? Forget Chen. My wife, of course if it were mine, don't try to take advantage of her original body. Request for recommended tickets, end of this chapter. Chapter 6. How can you sleep at your age and cultivation? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. At your age and cultivation, how can you sleep? Mingying, who was directly sent back to the yard, felt her eyelids twitching violently. I don't know why, she always feels a bit strange about forgetting dust. After glancing at the pitch-black mountain top and pondering for a long time, Mingying finally picked up the spring return sword and climbed the mountain path. After spiritual power was injected into the spring return sword, the emerald green sword body began to shine. Mingying, who successfully made her own flashlight, began climbing the mountain. I don't know if it's because of the so-called qi intake, but after training during the day, the soreness and pain symptoms she left behind have long disappeared completely. With the spring sword shining, Mingying didn't feel too scared anymore. The trees that block the light in the daytime have now become somewhat permeable in the dim night. Lighting with spiritual power along the way is not a small expense for Mingying. While climbing the mountain, Mingying also comprehended some other uses of spiritual power. By mobilizing spiritual power and concentrating it on the legs, one can achieve vigorous walking like flying. With this method, she quickly climbed to the top of the mountain. It's just that this meager spiritual power not only needs to provide illumination for the spring return sword, but also needs to be used for mountain climbing, which is quite exhausting for her. Following the peach grove, she found the pale-looking Forgetful Dust leaning against the tree. Mingying breathed a sigh of relief and quickly walked over to Forget Chen's side. She knelt down on one knee and reached out her hand to wake him up. However, as they approached, the scent of lotus flowers with blood rushed towards them. I don't want the pure lotus fragrance in the daytime to be more like a lotus flower soaked in blood. She looked up and down at Forget Dust in front of her, but she didn't see any wounds. The hand that landed on Forget Chen's shoulder gently pushed his shoulder, and Mingying's voice fell low. Forget Chen, wake up. The closed Buddha slowly opened his eyes, but he looked extremely weak. Mingying, how did you come back? He had a hint of surprise on his face, but Mingying looked at it with a hint of heartache. I won't come back, will you just blow the cold air here? Those who cultivate immortals will not be caught in typhoid fever by a slight wind, said Forgetful Dust straightforwardly with such a pale face, but uttering such words, Mingying only remembered to laugh angrily and say, then I'll go. With these words, she stood up straight away. Unfortunately, the Buddha leaning against the tree never spoke, and Mingying didn't go far, so he fell back directly. Looking at Forget Chen, she looked at him with a look of hatred and said, do you really plan to stay here all night? Forget Chen looked at her face full of anger and suddenly smiled. As Mingying became increasingly angry, he restrained his smile and looked at the girl in front of him with his slightly dim golden eyes. Could you please help Mingying, poor monk? Although angry, Mingying still stepped forward and made a cane for Forget Chen. Forgetting dust did not put all the weight on Mingying, so the journey down the mountain was not difficult. Waiting to deliver the person to her doorstep, Mingying finally breathed a sigh of relief. With the idea of helping others to the end, she put them on the bed and carefully forgot to close the door before leaving with peace of mind. Listening to the footsteps outside the door, forgetful dust finally couldn't help but laugh out loud. Laughing and laughing, there was a tearing injury, and the blood that was originally covered by the spell flowed out again. He seemed to understand why his original body had fallen in love with such a girl. He also likes it a bit. Although a bit lazy, I still persist when it's time to work hard. Seemingly cold and tough, but in reality, my heart is incredibly soft. I also like to act chivalrous and protect other innocent people. Just like tonight, even though he was so scared of the dark that he insisted on finding him on the mountain. If he had not been vigilant at the time and had discovered her arrival in advance, covering up all traces, perhaps she would have discovered it carefully soon. That's great, she's by his side now. After sending Forget Chen back, Mingying finally lay down to sleep with peace of mind. A good night's dream. When I open my eyes again, the sky is still gray. I don't know if it's the cultivation of spiritual energy in the immortal realm, or if without a phone or computer, the biological clock automatically starts to go to bed and wake up early. Mingying obediently washed herself up, and then ran briskly to find Forget Chen. Coincidentally, as soon as I arrived at the entrance of the yard, I saw Forget Dust push open the door and walk out. After one night, Forget Chen's face no longer looked pale as before, and he looked very energetic, as if last night's weakness was a flash in the pan. Seeing forgetfulness like this, Mingying also breathed a sigh of relief and warmly greeted him. Good morning, Forgetfulness, should we go have breakfast together early? Exactly, Mingying, you have already infused your qi into your body. We also need to bid farewell to the village chief, said Forget Chen with a nod. Since eliminating demons, Mingying's daily meals have been warmly sent by the village head's family. Of course, the place of residence is also arranged by the village chief. During the idle months in rural areas, this summer season will definitely not be wasted. As soon as dawn comes, I go out early to farm. Yesterday, Mingying also went to the village chief's house to pick up the meal that had been prepared for her long ago. As for today, it was a bit early today, and the village chief's family had not yet gone out. When they saw Forget Chen and Mingying, the village chief immediately stood up and saluted. I don't know if the two immortals are coming. It's a mistake to welcome them from afar. Mingying quickly held on to the village chief's arm and said, Village chief, you don't need to be polite. I came to bid farewell to Forget Chen. The village chief had long known that the two immortals would not stay here, but as they were about to leave so soon, he felt somewhat uneasy and said, well. Is it because we didn't treat them well? Mingying waved her hand and said, No, village chief. You've been overthinking. I've been bothering you these days. As a self-reliant social animal, I suddenly started eating free rice. Although it was obtained through my own labor force, I always felt strange in my heart. So when I heard that I wanted to leave, Mingying was quite happy. After all, it's quite rare to come to the cultivation world. If you can enjoy the beautiful scenery on the way to forget the dust, it would be a beautiful thing. I also have a sect task at hand, so it's really inconvenient to continue bothering me, said Forget Chen on one side. Knowing their determination to leave, the village chief sighed weakly and said, the two immortals are serious. It is our Daoxiang village that should thank you. If it weren't for you, we would definitely have been harmed by the snake demon. When Mingying walked out of the village chief's house, she had an extra breakfast in her hand and a piece of evenly plump bacon in her other hand. She turned her head to look at Forget Chen with empty hands and was puzzled. Forget Chen, don't you eat? Forgotten Chen shook his head and said, I am already a cultivator during the tribulation period and do not need to eat. How far is it to soar during the transition period? Upon hearing this news, Mingying immediately became interested. Unexpectedly, the Buddha in front of him suddenly stopped and turned his head to look at her. The book I gave you contains these things. Have you never read them? Although his tone was not emphasized at all, Mingying was feeling guilty and tense. She always felt like forgetting Chen was asking her. How can you sleep at your age and cultivation level? One change. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Seeking Marriage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Seeking Marriage. I was too tired last night. I didn't have time to watch, so I rested early. Mingying smiled awkwardly and, following what Forget Chen said last night, inputted the spiritual energy into the storage bracelet. Quickly, she mastered the method of using storage bracelets proficiently, and after putting in the excess bacon on her hand, she took out a thin book from inside. In order to show her diligent study, Mingying didn't even have a chance to taste the breakfast specially made by the village chief's family for her, so she swallowed it whole. Then he quickly found a handkerchief to wipe his hands and mouth, and opened the book to read. The Tianqian continent is home to mortals, cultivators, as well as demons and demons. Not all demon tribes are cannibalistic beings like snake demons, and there are still some good demons who follow the path of cultivating immortals. As for demons, in addition to the naturally raised demon race, there are also demon cultivators. There are cultivators who fall into demons, as well as demonic cultivators who go astray, but without exception, these cultivators are unable to control their desires and do disgusting things. For example, using the bones and blood of mortals to cultivate immortality. At present, the cultivation world is divided into 7 major sects, with the sword cultivation sect led by Zangjin Mountain, followed by the Dharma cultivation of the ethereal sect, the cultivators of the Tianji Pavilion who follow the path of divination and calculation, the Buddhist cultivation of the Wanxiang Temple, the dual cultivation cultivators of the Hehuan sect, the spirit sect dominated by beasts, and the Wenqin Valley, which has the most medical training. As for the realm of cultivating immortals, it can be roughly divided into the qi refining stage of introducing qi into the body. Building the foundation. Golden elixir. Yuanying. Distraction. Unity. Crossing calamity. Mahayana. After the Mahayana, there was an ascent, but according to the book, there have been nearly 10,000 years of unmanned ascent in the Tianqian continent. Spiritual roots are divided into 5 element spiritual roots and mutated spiritual roots. In addition to miscellaneous spiritual roots and single spiritual roots, there is also a distinction based on purity between heavenly spiritual roots and ordinary single spiritual roots. Single spiritual roots, especially heavenly spiritual roots, have always been favored by various sects. It's not that the cultivation world has any dissatisfaction with mixed spiritual roots. The more mixed spiritual roots there are, the more difficult it is to cultivate. Most miscellaneous spiritual roots are often exhausted before they break through. After leaving Daoxiang village, Forget Dust picked up her collar, shrunk to an inch, and then arrived at another bustling city. Langcheng. Later, Mingying saw many familiar clothes. Blue and white, it was the clothes worn by the Tianji Pavilion cultivator who went to Daoxiang village that day. No wonder the people from Tianji Pavilion arrived near Daoxiang village so quickly, but there was one thing that Mingying didn't quite understand. After inquiry, it was known that the snake demon was in the later stage of the golden elixir, and the lord of the Tianji Pavilion, Xian Hanyue, was the great perfection of crossing the robbery. So a small snake demon, as for taking so many disciples to catch it. Whether it's catching the snake demon or something else, Mingying is not quite sure. At this moment, she was stuffed into the carriage that had fallen from the forgotten dust bag and was on her way to the sex grand competition. Mingying also asked him curiously why he didn't go directly when he could shrink to an inch, but Forget Chen said that Buddhism emphasizes cultivation and cannot rely on external forces. Furthermore, 6 months after the sect comparison, we are not in a hurry now. There are many cultivators in Langcheng, but Mingying's small qi cultivation period is not eye-catching. As for Forget Dust, she has long hidden her cultivation. After reading the book, Mingying's gaze fell on the snacks loudly being sold on the street. Whether in modern times or the cultivation world, the buying routine is still simple and unadorned, and street selling always attracts people's attention. Glancing at Mingying, her eyes were fixed on the outside, and Forget Chen was still a bit dazed. I almost forgot that the girl in front of me is only in her 20s, and she is still in the age of loving beauty and dressing up. He closed the book in his hand and suggested, "We happen to have some things we haven't bought yet. Do Mingying want to go down together?" I heard that she could go down and take a stroll, so of course Mingying nodded wildly. The one pulling the horse cart is a monster, which can be stored in the monster bag. Next, but if Fan Mingying's gaze stays on it for a few more seconds, Forget Dust will directly take out the spirit stone to buy things. Although the combination of bald and beautiful girls may seem strange, it does not affect everyone's enthusiasm for Lingshire. After learning that the other party was generous in their actions, many merchants looked at Mingying as if they had seen a dog with meat buns and warmly greeted them. There is a storage bracelet, and all the purchased items are put away. Strolling all the way to the street, Mingying looked up and saw the tree covered with red lines and wooden signs. The old man with white hair and white beard under the tree was sitting on this small table, leisurely basking in the sun. Seeing Mingying and Forgetful Dust walking over, the old man spoke with a hint of nostalgia. "I thought he was a monk from the Hehuan sect and the Wanxiang temple again. This one is very soulful." Mingying suddenly became interested and said, "Did any other female cultivators of the Hehuan sect or Buddhas come here before?" This little Taoist friend guessed quite well. 1,000 years ago, a saint of the Hehuan sect came to me with a Buddhist monk to hang a marriage plaque. "Do you want to hang a marriage plaque with the Buddhist monk behind you?" the old monk said as he took out the plaque. Mingying turned around and glanced at her shiny head, which had forgotten dust. She quickly shook her head and said, "No, no, we can only write about marriage, can't we write about anything else?" "If you want to write anything else, you can do it," said the old monk, and he saw the Buddhist monk following the girl walking up. After Mingying asked clearly, she took a pen and a wooden sign and hid to the side. On the wooden plaque, there were a few words of peace, joy, and happiness written crookedly, which was too ugly for her to look at. Glancing at the monk who was selling wooden signs, Mingying sneaked to the other side of the tree and threw the wooden sign with red tassels on it. Since she came here, she has been receiving help from Forget Chen. It was him who protected her, taught her how to practice swordsmanship, and led her into the path of immortality. I don't have much ability to repay him now, and all I can do is pray for him and wish him peace and happiness. The reason Mingying came here was initially just to save Pu Zhan. After all, he blocked the falling objects from high altitude, so she couldn't turn a blind eye. She did not separate Forget Chen and Pu Zhan into two people, but the person she had the most contact with was Forget Chen in front of her. Mingying didn't think that Forget Chen would like her. After all, it's just a game where the holy monks and Buddhas fall for her in the game. In reality, who would give up on themselves for any reason? Especially in the books I have recently read, it is also written that Buddhism cannot be influenced by emotions. After breaking the precepts with emotions, falling into the demon only lasts for a moment. But not being successful is one thing, and whether she works hard or not is another. It is impossible to be flaccid. She will work hard to cultivate immortality and also try to find ways to conquer and forget the dust. As the footsteps approached, Mingying turned around and saw the forgotten dust walking from the other side of the tree. He also held a wooden sign in his hand, but Mingying didn't think the other party was here to beg for any marriage. "Forget Chen, do you also pray for your family's blessings?" Forget Chen nodded slightly and said, "Exactly, are you Mingying too?" Mingying pointed to the sign on the tree and said, "I have already made it up. Do you want me to help you?" "No, it's more meaningful to throw it yourself." He shook his head and refused. Mingying didn't stay much and went straight to the front to find the old monk to settle the bill, but was told that her share had already been forgotten and paid by Chen. "Okay, I spent a lot of spiritual stones on them today, and it's not lacking in this one. Guess what's written on the brand of Forget Dust?" End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Solitude on Rainy Nights. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Solitude on Rainy Nights. At the moment when Mingying's figure was completely blocked by the tree, Forget Dust released her divine consciousness. A keen sense of divinity effortlessly found the crooked wooden plaque among a pile of wooden signs, with the paint still drying up. The words, "peace and happiness," although not neat, are clearly visible. Who is this praying for? Is it him or the original body? The wooden plaque in his palm cracked, and an invisible wind wrapped around the crooked plaque, falling into his hand. Forgotten Dust originally intended to destroy it, but in the end, he managed to put it in his own storage bag by a stroke of luck. The wooden plaque with cracks in its palm was repaired and then hung high on the branch. When Forget Dust walked over, Mingying was still looking at the wooden sign hanging low on the branch. Except for those who seek marriage and vows between lovers, the remaining wooden plaques are mostly for praying for blessings. After finishing these, forget the dust and lead Mingying straight to Cloud City. Since we are participating in the sect competition, it is impossible for Forget Chen to be alone. As a Buddha of the Wanxiang Temple, he is also responsible for leading the Buddhist practice under his sect. Previously, he realized the tacit understanding and left the team to go to Daoxiang village. Now that the trouble has been resolved, he naturally needs to go find the Buddha under his command. And now, this group of Buddhists has arrived at Yuncheng. Cloud City is not comparable to Langcheng, it is just a small city, managed under the ethereal gate. Even if there are monsters pulling the cart, it will take half a month to travel from Langcheng to Yuncheng. During this period, Mingying was forgotten to follow this practice. Apart from sleeping and eating time, her life was only about cultivation. I practice swordsmanship during the day and meditate at night. In just half a month, Mingying felt that her swordsmanship had made rapid progress. Before, she used to run 3 breaths a step, but now she can chase wild wolves for thousands of meters and hunt wild chickens and rabbits with flexible hands and feet, bringing some waves to her boring life. Although Forget Chen is a vegetarian, he was really skilled at cooking back then. Mingying sometimes looked at the other person skillfully cleaning blood stains by the river and opening the belly of the rabbit, and doubted whether he was actually a Buddhist practitioner. Otherwise, how could these things be done so smoothly? Diligent cultivation paid off, and by the time she reached Cloud City, Yuan Kefi had already transformed from a vegetable chicken that introduced qi into her body to a vegetable chicken that had reached the 2nd level of qi cultivation. However, Mingying did not expect that they would still encounter pouring rain as they approached Yuncheng. The rain grew heavier and the small carriage couldn't stop the storm, but fortunately they soon saw the thatched cottage not far away. The thatched cottage is somewhat dilapidated, and there are several places in the house that are leaking rain. The thick dust indicates that its owner has left long ago. At this point, the benefits of the wood sky spirit root are reflected. The leaking hole was quickly covered by green plants nurtured by the bright light, firmly blocking other rainwater. Even if she only has cultivation during the qi refining period, the cultivation speed brought by the heavenly spirit root can quickly replenish her spiritual energy. Waiting for the rain to be blocked, Mingying performed a dust removal technique and the house became clean and tidy. Even the horse moved into the temporary trellis shed built by Mingying. A large portion of the food I bought in Langcheng has already been eaten, and there is not much left. I didn't participate in cleaning the house, which happened to be a training for Mingying, who had just been exposed to magic. It was only after confirming that the stable could not withstand the wind and rain that Mingying sneaked into the room. The thatched cottage was empty, and the excess items had long been thrown out. In the middle of the house, there was only a bonfire built by Forget Dust. Along the way, there was a round pot made of wood, which was cooking steaming congee. Every time she sees this pot, Mingying feels a little emotional. Some things in the cultivation world are truly magical, such as the pot used for cooking, which has been used for half a month and still maintains its original color. The glittering mantra is engraved on the edge of the bowl, which is clearly visible, just like when it was taken out. This pot is still a forgettable thing. It is said that it cannot cook meat, and there are no other drawbacks. And with just a few spells, it can become bigger and smaller, making it very convenient to carry. Seeing Mingying coming in, Forgotten Chen handed her the congee. It's just the right time. Congee has been cooked. How about the taste? The clothes on the body become dry under the effect of water condensation, and the steaming congee dispels the cold in an instant. It's sweet purple potato congee. Great. She quickly boasted about the first bowl and was about to have another one when she heard Forget Chen say, "You've already eaten a lot of pastries before, and if you have another bowl, you'll have to accumulate food." After touching her stomach, Mingying looked at Forget Chen with a longing gaze and said, "Forget Chen, do you have that kind of magic that helps digestion?" Forgotten Chen naturally knew the other party's intention, so he shook his head coldly and said, "No. Accumulating food is indeed not very comfortable, and Mingying can only give up her plan to have another bowl." With her head propped up, she looked out of the house as the pattering rain flowed down the roof. It seems like the sound of rain can easily hypnotize. Thinking about it, Mingying yawned, propped her chin with her hand, and closed her eyes. As she was about to fall, an invisible black mist suddenly appeared, holding her up like a cloud and wrapping her inside. If Mingying was awake, she could see at a glance that the black fog was exactly the same as the evil spirit in the snake demon cave. The forgetful dust sitting on the other side stood up slowly and walked to Mingying's side, holding her in his arms. This half-month of cultivation has made her lose some weight, which falls on her legs without any pressure. Perhaps smelling the familiar fragrance of lotus flowers, the sleeping girl moved towards him a bit, and her gentle breath hit her lower abdomen, causing the originally stable magic energy to become restless. The fusion of spiritual roots is very good, but in just half a month, she has achieved the cultivation of the second level of qi refining. Similarly, as a heavenly spirit root, he has accumulated so many years of experience in his original body, and it took him 5 years to break through the process of refining qi and enter the foundation building stage. According to the cultivation progress of the lighting screen, without any accidents, she may enter the foundation building stage within 3 years. Forget Chen never thought about letting him take pills, or natural materials and treasures. Practice is down to earth, step by step. Only by laying a solid foundation can one avoid accidents. If it's not for special circumstances, taking shortcuts is undoubtedly a self-destructive path. But thinking of the world's preference for Mingying this time, Forget Dust only felt happy. In this way, she can only soar in this place. Her original time and space could not accept the existence of a cultivator, so she could only stay here until she could break through the void herself and have enough strength to resist the heavenly way of that world. And for such a long time, only he can be by her side. Forgetful Dust bent down and waved away the magical energy that had climbed up at an unknown time, and leaned down to kiss her forehead. Very light, suppressing one's emotions, an extremely gentle kiss. Eyeing, please fall in love with me quickly. He has no self-control over her, but he can't wait long. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Watching the excitement, how could it be without her? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Watching the excitement, how could it be without her? When Mingying woke up, it was already dawn. The air after the rain still had a fishy smell of soil, and as soon as she opened her eyes, she saw a chin as fair as jade. There are soft to hard muscles under the head, a refreshing lotus fragrance at the tip of the nose, and a cloak covering the body. She just slept openly on someone else's lap. Mingying felt her cheeks burning, and she carefully held up her hand, wanting to step out of Forget Chen's embrace. But at the moment when there was a movement, the person in sight suddenly lowered their head, and at the same time, one hand supported her head. "Be careful, don't fall off." "Thank you." Mingying, who had never been so close to the opposite sex before, felt her heart beating like a drum. "I'll get up first. I troubled you last night. It wasn't until I was far away from the dust that my heart, which was pounding hard, converged by 2 points. After distancing herself from the other person, her chaotic mind finally cleared up a bit. Speaking of how tired she has been lately, it's rare for her to be lazy and not need to practice, just dozing off like this. Even sleep until dawn the next day. And he even sleeps directly on the other person's thigh. After breakfast, Mingying got into the carriage and began to daydream. Speaking of which, don't boys have that kind of reaction early in the morning? Why didn't she feel anything when she woke up? She is clearly leaning on her thighs. Is it because he practiced Buddhism that he nurtured his stomach, or is it because he only has one needle? Speaking of which, does the separation of the 3 souls and 7 souls have any impact on the physical hardware? But forget Dust and Pu Zhan look the same, the body should be the same. The more she thought about it, Mingying's gaze couldn't help but look towards the other person, Forget Chen. I can't tell the size of this sitting posture. So why didn't she take a look at the size on Pu Zhan's body before she came? If it's really a needle, use it. Perhaps this kind of gaze was too naked, and Forget Dust suddenly looked up. His golden eyes looked at Mingying, full of doubts. Is there anything wrong with cultivation? No. Mingying, who was startled, quickly shook her head and tried to focus her attention on the cultivation manual in her hand. No, I can't concentrate at all. Fortunately, she quickly gained an understanding. The sound of selling from far to near filled her heart with joy. She lifted the door curtain and saw the crowd coming and going in front of her. Compared to Langcheng, Yincheng is not as bustling, but there is still a group of lively vendors selling things at the entrance of the city. This is the perfect opportunity for her to break free from this awkward atmosphere. Leave a sentence. I'll go down and take a look. Mingying quickly ran down and headed straight for the city gate. Then he was stopped by the soldier guarding the door. Enter the city and hand over the lower grade spirit stone, 2 pieces per person. Mingying looked silently at the old man who was carrying a pole into the city and said, "That old man. A cultivator needs to pay, not a mortal." The defending soldier explained impatiently, "Are you going in or not? Don't block here if you don't go in." Mingying hesitated a bit. It's not that she doesn't have spirit stones. After practicing for the past half-month, she has also been collecting wool in the forest and exchanged some spirit stones with the found spirit grass and forgotten dust for backup. Previously in Langcheng, Forgetting Chen was so generous in spending money on her because he said that the money should have been given to borrow the Chunhui sword. After all, for Jianxiu, the sword is her half-body and cannot be easily lent to others. Even if Mingying himself doesn't know, he can't fool her. These excuses were recognized by Mingying for a while, but later she didn't know if it was due to the favor of the heavens. Along the way, she picked up many good things, so she used them to stay, and used them to exchange for some spirit stones for emergency use. And has the cultivation world also collected tolls? Why doesn't Langcheng exist? Mingying's gaze turned to Forget Dust on the side, just as she was about to ask, a voice suddenly came from behind. "This Taoist friend, if you have a spirit stone, why don't you hurry into Cloud City? It's not very safe outside the city recently." Mingying turned around and saw a man standing not far away, dressed in white clothes and surpassing snow. After practicing for many days, her intuition told her that the person in front of her was a cultivator. The sharp gaze of the other party fell on Mingying, looking at her with a hint of anticipation. "Can you tell me the reason and the reason?" Forgotten Chen took a few steps forward and blocked Mingying behind him. The white-clad cultivator's eyes showed a hint of surprise. When did this Buddhist practice appear in front of me? He didn't even notice the other person's presence just now. Either the cultivator in front of him has some hidden cultivation treasures, or the other person's cultivation is higher than him. Thinking of a certain possibility, the white-clad cultivator became excited and said, "Is this Taoist friend the forgotten dust Buddha of the Wanxiang temple?" Mingying poked her head out from behind the forgotten dust, feeling a bit strange. Did he have these few words printed on his face? As she spoke, she also glanced at Forget Dust. Forgotten Chen clasped his hands together and silently recited the Buddhist name. "I am just Forgotten Chen, do you know what my friend is up to?" The intimate demeanor of the two made the white-clothed cultivator hesitate, but the most important thing was another matter. "Forget the dust Buddha, I am Yi Qingshi, a disciple of the ethereal sect. A few days ago, Master Mingying from your temple passed by and unexpectedly discovered the presence of a fierce ghost in a village hundreds of miles away from Yuncheng. So I took a group of Buddhist cultivators to go. It has been 5 days now and I have not returned yet. Moreover, I have lost any news of the cultivators sent from Cloud City." Yi Qingshi looked worried and said, "Now that Yin Qi is rampant in that area, some cultivators with low cultivation have also been brutally killed. Only Cloud City's formation can withstand 1 or 2 attacks. Opening the formation consumes a lot, so the soldiers guarding the city collect spirit stones from the cultivators." No wonder. But Mingying was still a bit puzzled. Is this Yin Qi only effective for cultivators? Yi Qingshi also showed a hint of helplessness. Indeed, the people around him have not been affected by Yin Qi. That's interesting. In the books that Mingying has read, Yin Qi can have an impact on both humans and cultivators. If the Yin Qi here is only targeted at cultivators, it means that the Yin Qi here is controlled by someone. "It seems that I must make a trip now," said Forget Chen, who also guessed this as he spoke. He looked at Mingying on the side and said, "Mingying, are you going to the city or are you going with me?" I never expected that Forget Chen would ask herself this vegetable chicken. Mingying hesitated and said, "I only refine qi on the 2nd level, won't I hold you back? With me around, you don't have to worry." Forget Chen's tone was steady. "Since it won't hold you back, it's not bad if you have a long understanding." "Then I'll trouble you," said Mingying, looking straight at Yi Qingshi on the side. Yi Qingshi felt that the behavior of these two people was even more strange, but since both of them agreed, he naturally wouldn't talk too much. After all, the entire cultivation world has a powerful ability to cross the tribulation period with just 2 hands, and the renowned Forgotten Dust Buddha, who subdues demons and eliminates demons, is among the leaders. He never fails to fulfill his promise. Request for tickets, end of this chapter. Chapter 10. Are you a hidden world expert? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Are you a hidden world expert? With Yi Qingshi leading the way and being a cultivator, in just a moment, the 3 of them arrived outside the village with the strongest Yin energy. The dense mist of the surrounding Yin Qi blocked people's vision, making everything around them blurry. Looking at the lush old locust trees growing at the village entrance, Mingying took out the spring return sword and boldly approached a bit. There are some old stone tablets under the locust tree, clearly carved with the words, Taoshi Village. In addition, they also have a strong smell of blood. The sharp sword energy flipped open the land, revealing the white bones of the forest with bloodstains. Unexpectedly, it was these things. Mingying took several steps back and turned to look at Forget Chen standing on the side. After a moment of contemplation at the front end, I shook my head and said, "It's not human bones, don't worry." "That's good," Mingying breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing these words. Yi Qingshi on one side was completely stunned when she took out her sword. He naturally looked down upon Mingying, a cultivator with low cultivation. After all, he had exceptional talent and was already in the golden elixir period within 100 years. But at the moment when he stepped out of the sword during the qi training period in front of him, he felt a sense of oppression. This is enough to prove the extraordinary qualities of this sword. Moreover, during her chi training period, she effortlessly wielded her sword intent. This trace of sword intent is very weak and inconspicuous, sandwiched in the sword energy, but it is something that countless sword cultivators in Sanjian Mountain may not be able to comprehend even after hundreds of years of cultivation. And now, she is only in the period of chi training. Although her sword posture is awkward, it also shows her exceptional talent. It's like a natural sword cultivator. Who doesn't like such a genius? In an instant, Yi Qingshi felt that he understood the reason why Forget Dust Buddha was so passionate about Mingying. If this Mingying girl is recruited into the Wanxiang Temple, I believe in the near future, there will definitely be another sword cultivator who can cross the tribulation period. Mingying didn't know that Yi Qingshi had added so much to her brain on one side. When she drew her sword and looked at the person leading the way, she felt a hint of fierceness in their gaze. However, she didn't take it to heart. She just thought of the group of disciples who were unaware of life and death, and felt a little anxious. Can you feel people now? Forget Chen shook his head and said, the yin energy here is too strong to be detected with divine sense. Only by entering the village can we know. The entrance of Taoshi village, wrapped in yin qi, looked a bit permeable, but Forget Chen took a glance and walked straight inside. Seeing that Forget Chen was so reckless, Mingying's heart also relaxed. Since he dared to do so, it meant that it shouldn't be particularly dangerous here, and he immediately followed suit. Following closely behind, Yi Qingshi also walked up, thinking of getting close to Mingying. After all, she doesn't look like she's lost in love, there's still hope she can turn into the ethereal door. Black mist was like a huge beast, directly engulfing the figure of Forget Dust. Following closely behind, Mingying felt the temperature around him become very low. When she stepped out of the black mist, she could no longer see the figure of Forget Dust. As soon as she turned around, Yi Qingshi, who was leading them, was still following behind her buttocks. Seeing her movements, the other party was a bit strange. Mingdao friend, you. The remaining words got stuck in his throat, and Yi Qingshi's eyes widened with a slightly panicked tone. Be careful. As he spoke, he rushed forward. A fierce ghost with a fierce face appeared behind Mingying at some point, its sharp claws gripping her head, intending to tear her to pieces. At a critical moment, Yi Qingshi witnessed with his own eyes what he believed to be a weak and helpless qi cultivation period turning around at an extraordinary speed. The emerald green sword did not even come out of its sheath and directly cut off the ghostly claws of the surprise attack. Li Guo was cut off by the sword energy wrapped around him, and after completing all of this, Mingying quickly turned to him. The emerald green sword was unsheathed, and its sharp edge was straight towards the face door. Too fast without any resistance, Yi Qingshi stiffened in place and watched as the sword thrust towards him. Then the sword edge brushed against his face and nailed it directly to his outstretched hand. The scream of a fierce ghost came from behind, and the cold feeling dissipated by 2 points. The feeling of being monitored still existed, but it was not as chilling as before. Mingying, who withdrew her sword, looked at Yi Qingshi, who was stunned. She reached out and patted his shoulder, saying, I'm back to my senses. What question did you just want to ask me? I'm so proud and arrogant, Mingdao friend. I'm sorry, sobered Yi Qingshi as he bowed to Mingying, his face full of shame. No wonder the Forgotten Dust Buddha brought people here. With such a quick reaction speed and swordsmanship, he is the only one among the three who is dragging the back. Sigh. What are you apologizing for? Mingying looked confused. I also wanted to ask if you have seen Forget Dust. We should have joined the formation, please Mingdao, I need to check it. Yi Qingshi's attitude became more respectful. After taking out a formation tray from the storage bag and inspecting the surroundings, Yi Qingshi said, the formation composed of yin qi is too large for me to break through. I only know that this formation is also equipped with an enchanting soul formation. We should have been separated from the Forgotten Dust Buddha. The master of the formation should have wanted to separate and solve the two people with low cultivation, but he didn't expect Mingying, who looked the weakest, to be particularly ruthless in his actions. When Yi Qingshi checked, he also saw the fierce ghosts guarding them around him taking action. The fierce ghost that was cut off by Mingying's sword had a certain deterrent power, making them dare not act rashly, but soon they couldn't suppress themselves and all rushed forward. Yi Qingshi, who was originally in the inverted arch formation, had already raised his throat. He was ready to interrupt the examination and help at any time, but he didn't expect the thin figure to block behind him directly. The sharp sword energy cut off the ghost claws, and every fierce ghost who attacked was beaten to pieces. In the end, they dared not step forward and could only retreat into the black mist to look straight at them. In this situation, Yi Qingshi's admiration for Mingying grew stronger. Knowing that it was just being separated, Mingying felt a little relieved, but since it was a formation, the book that was being carried by Forget Dust finally came into play. Mingying flipped through her backpack and then took out a golden metal plate that looked like a clock. "Take a look, can this work?" These are all things that were stuffed into the storage ring by Forget Dust. Mingying only knows that this thing can break through the formation, but she's not very clear about the rest. Lost Yi Qingshi held a metal plate and his gaze lit up as he looked at it clearly. But now is not the time to sigh. According to the legend, he gently flicked the pointer in his hand. The fog formed was dispersed, leaving a wide passage for the day. The two of them walked straight over. As the passage disappeared, Yi Qingshi breathed a sigh of relief as he confirmed that he had left the gathering place of fierce ghosts. He cherished the array in his hand and placed it back in Mingying's hand. He looked at Mingying with utmost seriousness and said, "Mingdao friend, are you a cultivator sent by a hidden family to train?" End of this chapter.